Nathan Cole set off for a quiet morning hike through Silverpine Forest, his boots crunching softly on fallen leaves. The retired firefighter sought peace, but the woods held a secret. He vanished without a trace, leaving loved ones desperate and searching. For a year, the forest whispered only silence. No sign, no clue. Then Mark Jensen, a ranger and longtime friend, stumbled upon a moss-covered stone deep in the shadows. Carved into its surface was Nathan's final message. The fire wasn't my last fight. This chilling discovery would change everything, unraveling a mystery far darker than anyone imagined. Nathan Cole's boots crunched softly against the dry carpet of fallen leaves, their brittle edges stirring underfoot with each careful step. The air was sharp and cold, biting at his cheeks and sending small puffs of breath into the dim forest. He adjusted the strap of his weathered backpack, feeling the familiar weight settle against his spine, a comfort as steady as the old compass tucked inside the side pocket. The Silverpine Forest stretched around him like a shadowed cathedral, the towering pines blotting out much of the morning sun and casting deep, wavering shadows across the narrow path. Nathan's eyes scanned the trail ahead, once clear and well-trodden, now softened by neglect and creeping underbrush. The scent of damp earth and decaying leaves filled his nostrils, mixed faintly with the crisp tang of pine resin. Somewhere far off, the murmur of a river slipped through the trees, a soothing, constant rhythm in contrast to the silence pressing in closer with every step. Nathan breathed it in, steadying himself against the quiet. This hike was meant to be a simple reprieve from the noise of life, a chance to remember a time when his fiercest battles were fought with flames and smoke, not with the loneliness that had quietly crept into his days since retiring. But as he ventured deeper, a strange tension began to coil beneath his skin, subtle and insistent. The trail underfoot, usually a reliable guide, was disappearing. Moss and brambles clawed at the edges, and the familiar markers, scratches on tree trunks and painted blazes, grew faint, almost fading into the bark. Nathan's brow furrowed. He stopped, pulling out the compass, its needle wavering slightly, though his practiced hand held it steady. "This isn't right," he muttered, voice low and rough with uncertainty. His eyes flicked to the trees lining the path, noticing fresh scratches, thin, sharp lines gouged deep into the bark. They weren't random. The patterns felt deliberate, almost like warnings, but their meaning was beyond him. He knelt, brushing his gloved fingers over one of the marks. The wood beneath was raw and fresh, the scent of sap stronger here. A shiver traced his spine despite the mild air. Nathan's heart beat steadily, but a flicker of doubt crept in. He glanced behind him, nothing but the endless wall of trunks and shadows. His footsteps resumed, quieter now, more cautious. The usual rhythm of his hike was broken by a growing awareness of unseen eyes watching from the shadows. Every crack of a twig, every rustle of leaves sounded amplified, echoing in the silence like a whispered warning. Nathan's mind wandered briefly to old stories, tales of woodsmen and hunters who spoke of the forest as a living thing, with moods and secrets. He shook the thought away. This was no place for superstition. It was a place for vigilance. Yet the gnawing unease refused to be ignored. The wind shifted, carrying a hint of smoke, faint and distant, yet unmistakable. He scanned the canopy, looking for signs of a fire, but the sky was clear, the branches still. "No fires today," he whispered, half to himself, though the words offered little comfort. The forest seemed to tighten around him, shadows growing longer, shapes in the distance blurring just beyond focus. Nathan slowed, hand resting on the hilt of his knife, a habit formed over decades of facing danger. He tried to center himself, breathing deliberately, grounding his thoughts. He had faced wildfires that devoured acres in minutes, rescued trapped hikers from steep cliffs, and battled exhaustion in freezing cold. But this silence was different. It pressed at his senses, a weight not easily shaken. He took a cautious step forward and caught sight of something, a flash of movement just at the edge of his vision. He spun, eyes wide, scanning the dense underbrush. A small fox darted away, its red coat disappearing between the trees. Relief washed through him, but the pounding in his chest did not subside. The forest held its secrets close, and Nathan felt the boundaries between the known and unknown blur. Stopping again, he reached up and traced a rough line etched into the bark at eye level. It was jagged, almost claw-like, too deliberate to be natural. His fingers trembled slightly as he pressed against the scarred wood. Sometimes the forest whispers secrets best left unheard, he muttered quietly to himself. The sun was just beginning to cast pale streaks of light through the dense canopy when Mark Jensen tightened the straps of his backpack and looked toward the dark, tangled forest ahead. Nathan hadn't come home last night. Not a single word. No calls. The silence felt like a weight pressing down on Mark's chest. His throat tightened as he glanced at the empty trailhead where Nathan had vanished the day before. Without hesitation, Mark barked orders to the small group gathered behind him. Local rangers, friends, and volunteers ready to scour the vast silverpine forest for any sign of their lost brother. The crisp morning air was thick with the smell of damp earth and fallen leaves, a scent both familiar and haunting now. Mark's voice cut through the stillness as he called Nathan's name repeatedly, each shout trembling with a mixture of hope and growing dread. "Nathan, you out there, buddy? We're coming for you." His eyes scanned the shadowed woods, catching movement in the underbrush that could be nothing or everything. The silence answered him with emptiness. Liam Scott, a younger ranger with an eager yet cautious gaze, moved steadily at Mark's side. His breath formed little clouds in the cold air as he carefully studied the trunks around them. "Look here," Liam said softly, pointing at a series of strange scratches carved deep into the bark of a nearby pine. The symbols were jagged and deliberate, unlike anything nature would create. "These don't look random. Could it be Nathan's way of marking a path? Trying to tell us something?" Mark knelt to inspect the marks, the rough bark scraping his palms. A flicker of hope stirred deep within him, but he forced his face into a mask of calm. "If it is, we'd better follow it carefully. Could be the key to finding him." His voice was steady, but inside, a knot of fear twisted tighter. The search party pressed forward, their boots crunching through the thick carpet of leaves and twigs. Radios crackled with static. The tracking dogs tugged on their leashes, noses low to the ground. The forest seemed alive with whispers, an eerie symphony of rustling branches, distant bird calls, and the occasional snap of a twig that made every man jump. Shadows flickered between trees, teasing their nerves, while cold fingers of wind slipped through the branches, chilling them to the bone. Mark's mind churned with every step. He pictured Nathan's steady gait, the way he'd laugh off fatigue, the glint of determination in his eyes. How could his closest friend, his brother in arms, simply vanish without a trace? The forest, which once had been a sanctuary, now felt like a labyrinth designed to trap and confuse. Hours bled into night. The sky darkened, and the once bright moon was swallowed by a thickening veil of clouds. The searchers huddled around small campfires, their faces pale in the flickering glow. Mark's voice was hoarse but persistent as he repeated the call that had become their anthem. "Nathan, if you can hear us, hold on. We won't stop until you're back." Liam sat beside him, exhaustion pulling at his young features. "Mark, did you ever see anything like those marks before? They feel wrong, like warnings." Mark's jaw tightened. "No, and that's what's killing me. Nathan was never one to leave without reason. If those marks are warnings, whatever's out here, it's dangerous. But we have to find him." The howls began then, faint at first, then rising in a haunting chorus that echoed between the trees. Branches snapped just beyond their sight, and every rustle made the men jump. Mark's heart thundered. The forest was no longer a silent partner. It was an adversary. "We can't give up now," Mark insisted, though his own heart whispered doubt. Weeks had slipped away like shadows across the forest floor, each day folding into the next as Ridgewood's winter deepened its hold. The once vibrant silverpine was now draped in a thick blanket of snow, muffling the sounds of the woods and the fading hope of those who searched. The official search parties had packed up, their radios silent and their faces drawn with quiet defeat. Yet, amid the town's collective sorrow, one man refused to accept the finality others had settled for. Mark Jensen sat hunched over a large, worn map spread across the desk in his dimly lit cabin. The yellowed edges curled like the leaves Nathan used to crush beneath his boots. His eyes, bloodshot from long hours and sleepless nights, scanned every contour of the forest, tracing paths Nathan might have taken. The firelight flickered, casting dancing shadows that seemed to mock his efforts. "There has to be something I'm missing," he muttered, voice low and steady with determination, fingers tapping against the faded paper as if willing a clue to reveal itself. Outside, the wind howled, rattling window panes and sending flurries of snow swirling past the frosted glass. Mark's mind churned through memories of their years fighting blazes side by side, the grit, the silence after a fire was tamed, the unspoken bond forged in smoke and danger. Nathan wasn't just lost. Something had taken him, something beyond the reach of maps and man's knowledge. His obsession gnawed at his spirit, fraying the edges of his relationships back in town. Family dinners went unattended, calls went unanswered, and worried voices urged him to let go. But Mark's heart clenched tight. "I can't," he told himself. "Not yet." Meanwhile, miles away in the thick of Silverpine, Liam Scott trudged through snow-laden branches, breath pluming in the cold air. The forest seemed quieter here, as if holding its breath. His boots sank into the white powder, crunching softly. Liam's gaze was sharp beneath his knit cap, every sense alert to the subtlest shift in the woods. He had chosen to keep patrolling alone, driven by respect for Nathan's legacy and a restless need to find answers no one else could. His hands were tucked deep in his jacket pockets, fingers occasionally brushing the small notebook where he recorded odd signs and patterns he'd observed. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the skeletal trees, Liam stumbled upon something that tightened the pulse in his chest, a clearing barely visible through a tangle of underbrush, hidden by nature's slow reclaiming. The ground was marked with strange arrangements. Scattered stones formed odd patterns, like a language only the earth understood. Liam knelt, brushing snow away with cautious fingers, revealing faint impressions, footprints too blurred to identify, yet leading further into the shadowed forest. He straightened slowly, his breath hitching in the chill. This could be it," he whispered, voice hushed, barely stirring the cold air. His eyes darted between the markings and the darkening path ahead. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying an eerie undertone, as if the woods themselves murmured secrets in an ancient tongue. Yet, unseen by Liam, eyes tracked his every move from the dense thicket beyond the clearing. A figure cloaked and worn, muted colors leaned against a gnarled oak, face obscured beneath a weathered hood. Cyrus Blake, a man whispered about in Ridgewood folklore and known to few in the nearby town, observed with a cautious, calculating gaze. His breath was steady despite the cold, lips pressed into a thin line as he studied Liam's approach. Cyrus had lived off the grid for years, carving out a solitary existence in the deep Silverpine where most dared not venture. He carried the weight of secrets, stories about the forest's dark past, and those who had disappeared within it. Though his reasons for watching Liam were his own, a faint flicker of curiosity stirred within him. This stranger, this young ranger, was edging closer to truths Cyrus had long guarded, truths that might explain the fate of the man so many had given up on. The clearing held its silence, snowflakes settling gently over stones and footprints, as Liam traced the mysterious path forward. The forest pressed close, shadows lengthening with every moment, and the distant call of a lone crow pierced the stillness. Liam's heart quickened, not with fear, but with a flicker of hope, tempered by the knowledge that the forest was vast and unforgiving. He paused, looking over his shoulder briefly, unaware of the eyes that lingered beyond the trees. "Not everyone in the forest wants to be found," Liam whispered under his breath. Mark's fingers brushed against the rough fabric snagged on a thorny bush. He tugged gently, heart pounding as the torn piece came free, a faded scrap unmistakably from Nathan's jacket. The memory of his friend surged through him like a sudden flame, sharp and relentless. "He was here," Mark whispered, voice thick with a mix of hope and dread. Beside him, Cyrus Blake's eyes narrowed beneath his weathered brow, the flickering light of their headlamps casting deep shadows over his angular face. "That's no ordinary scrap. This place, it's marked by more than just time," Cyrus murmured, his tone low and edged with warning. His breath came out in clouds against the chill that wrapped the forest like a heavy cloak. "These trails hide secrets old as the trees themselves." Mark swallowed hard, tightening his grip on his flashlight as he scanned the thick canopy above. The dense branches nodded overhead, blotting out the night sky, but beneath the trees, the air felt electric, alive with a tension that set his nerves on edge. The crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant call of an owl were swallowed quickly by a growing silence, an oppressive stillness that seemed to watch and wait. Their steps slowed, careful now. Cyrus's voice cut through the quiet. "Nathan spoke of carvings, warnings left by those who came before us. Forest guardians, they called them. Symbols meant to keep something locked away." His eyes flicked toward the underbrush, dark and tangled, as if hiding watchers. Mark's mind raced, every memory of Nathan's last days flashing like a flickering lantern. The man who had once faced raging infernos now found himself fighting a fire unlike any other, one born of shadow and whispers. But who, or what, was this new adversary? The path twisted sharply, leading them to a clearing swallowed by shadows. Here, nestled against a moss-covered boulder, stood an ancient stone formation, flat, broad stones etched with precise lines and shapes that glowed faintly in the beam of their lights. Mark felt his breath catch. The carvings were deliberate, a message left for anyone brave or desperate enough to find it. Cyrus moved closer, tracing a finger along the grooves, his face grave. "These are warnings," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Marks to keep travelers from going further." Nathan must have seen this and known what it meant. Mark crouched, examining the largest stone. Etched deep into its surface was a phrase, worn but unmistakable. "The fire wasn't my last fight." The words hit Mark like a punch, echoing through the hollow silence of the forest. His eyes met Cyrus's, searching for answers in the man's unreadable expression. "We're just beginning to understand what happened to him," Mark said quietly, eyes scanning the eerie carvings. The carved stone lay before them like a silent sentinel, its weathered surface etched with words that seemed to pulse with an ancient energy. Mark's fingers hovered inches above the grooves, his breath shallow and uneven. The message wasn't just a farewell. It was a warning, a desperate call from Nathan that reached beyond the fading light of hope. Cyrus knelt beside the stone, his sharp eyes scanning the surrounding area, tracing the faint outlines of symbols barely visible beneath moss and lichen. These weren't random scratches. They were deliberate, carefully placed markers, like the forest itself was trying to communicate through forgotten language. A sudden snap echoed sharply through the stillness, breaking the heavy silence like a gunshot. Both men jerked their heads toward the sound, eyes wide with alarm. The brittle crack of a breaking branch, perhaps, but it carried a weight far heavier, an unseen presence intruding upon their fragile sanctuary. Cyrus's face tightened, the lines around his eyes deepening as he whispered, "We're not alone." His voice was low, tense, the kind of warning born from years of reading the forest's subtle signs. Mark's heart hammered against his ribs, each beat louder than the last, threatening to drown out the sounds around him. His gaze swept the dense wall of trees that pressed in from every side, searching for movement, a shadow, anything. The chill that settled over his skin wasn't from the autumn air. It was the creeping certainty that something watched them, something patient and unseen. Every instinct Nathan had ever shared about Silverpine's dangers flickered in Mark's mind. The wild beasts that roamed these woods, the treacherous cliffs waiting to claim the careless, but most unnerving of all, the human threats lurking just beyond the firelight. With a cautious step, Mark shifted his weight forward, the beam of his flashlight trembling in his grasp. The forest seemed to close in tighter with every footfall, the branches like fingers brushing his arms, the underbrush whispering secrets just out of reach. Cyrus rose slowly, eyes sharp, muscles coiled like a predator's. "We move together," he said, voice steady but low, a command forged in respect and urgency. Mark nodded, swallowing the lump forming in his throat. They advanced, senses straining, each crack of twig or rustle of leaf making their breath hitch. Footsteps, not their own, pattered faintly, rhythm irregular but deliberate. Mark's pulse quickened. "Did you hear that?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. But Cyrus only nodded, lips pressed thin. The path ahead twisted between gnarled roots and ancient trees, where sunlight failed to reach, swallowed by the dense canopy. A cold wind swept through, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, but underneath it, something acrid and metallic teased Mark's nostrils. He tightened his grip on the flashlight, fingers whitening. "What do you think Nathan was fighting?" Mark muttered, more to himself than to Cyrus, eyes scanning the dim woods for answers. The words carved on the stone burned in his mind. "The fire wasn't my last fight." Was it a battle of flesh and blood, or something far more sinister, buried in the forest's heart? Cyrus crouched by a nearby rock, brushing away dirt to reveal more faded symbols, triangles, spirals, and what looked like a stylized flame. "These marks warn of danger," he explained quietly, voice edged with reverence. "Not just natural threats, but something older, guardians, perhaps, or curses bound to this land." His gaze lifted, meeting Mark's with a grave intensity. Nathan stepped into something he couldn't escape. Mark swallowed hard, his jaw clenched. The weight of the discovery pressed down on him, a suffocating mix of fear and responsibility. The forest was no longer just a backdrop to a search. It had become a battleground. The idea of Nathan, his old friend, locked in some shadowy fight chilled Mark deeper than the autumn cold. A distant rustle drew their attention once more. Mark spun his flashlight toward the sound, the beam slicing through the darkness, revealing only twisted branches swaying in the breeze. Still, the feeling of eyes tracking their every move remained. His muscles tensed, ready for whatever might emerge from the shadows. "We have to keep moving," Mark said firmly, voice steady despite the knot tightening in his stomach. "Nathan left this for a reason. We have to find out why before it's too late." Mark's pulse quickened as a low growl rumbled through the thick underbrush, breaking the tense silence that had settled between him and Cyrus. The air felt heavier, charged with an uneasy electricity. From the shadows emerged a large black wolf, its fur sleek and glossy despite the dim light filtering through the twisted branches above. Its eyes glinted like polished obsidian, sharp and unblinking, reflecting an intelligence that was almost unsettling. Mark instinctively took a half-step back, muscles coiling for a fight or flight. The wolf's gaze locked onto him with an unsettling calm, as if it was weighing his very presence in its domain. Cyrus, standing just beside Mark, raised a steady hand without hesitation. His voice dropped to a near whisper, speaking words ancient and melodic, forest rites learned in the solitude of his youth, passed down through generations of men who knew the woods better than anyone. The wolf's tense posture softened, ears twitching, nostrils flaring as if deciphering the meaning of the words. Slowly, deliberately, the beast stepped back, melting into the shadowed underbrush without a trace, leaving only the faint rustle of leaves in its wake. Mark exhaled, a mixture of relief and something deeper, an unshakable chill that crept along his spine. "That wasn't any ordinary wolf," he murmured, eyes scanning the thinning darkness where the creature had vanished. "Nathan must have come face to face with something like that, something guarding more than just this forest." Cyrus nodded, his expression grave, brows furrowed beneath the hood of his weathered jacket. "These aren't wild animals, Mark. They're sentinels, bound by old pacts and ancient magic. The forest speaks in ways most don't understand." His voice was low but firm, carrying the weight of belief that Mark had yet to fully accept. With cautious steps, they pressed onward, the soft crunch of leaves and twigs beneath their boots the only sound accompanying their progress. Soon, The dense trees gave way to a shadowed opening hidden by hanging vines and moss-draped branches. Mark's flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing a narrow cave entrance framed by more carvings, symbols etched deep into the stone, eerily similar to the ones they had found on the ancient marker. The cave's breath was cold and damp, carrying a faint metallic scent that tickled Mark's nostrils. The faint drip of water echoed like distant clockwork in the otherwise still air, each drop punctuating the silence with a hollow note. The walls inside the cavern were rough but worn smooth in places, as if many had passed this way long ago. Mark shone his light along the walls, revealing a series of primitive drawings painted in faded ochre and charcoal. Scenes unfolded before his eyes, flickering flames consuming wood and stone, figures locked in desperate struggle, and a shadowy shape cloaked in darkness, looming over all. The images were both haunting and cryptic, evoking a story of conflict and survival etched in time. Cyrus's voice was barely audible as he stepped closer to the drawings, tracing a gnarled finger along the rough stone. This is where Nathan fought his last battle, against something that wanted to stay hidden. His words hung in the air like a warning. Mark swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat as the reality settled like a weight on his chest. The friend he'd been searching for had faced a danger far beyond lost trails or cold nights. The fight had been brutal, unseen by the world outside this silent cavern. Every step deeper into the cave was measured and deliberate. Mark's flashlight flickered as the passage narrowed, shadows lengthening and twisting with each movement. His breath came out in sharp puffs, mingling with the cold air that clung to the stone. The sound of their footsteps echoed, bouncing off the walls and creating a disorienting rhythm that made the cave feel alive, almost sentient. Cyrus's gaze was steady but somber, his years of forest knowledge guiding them through the darkness. He moved with a quiet confidence born from years of solitude and study, but Mark sensed an undercurrent of unease beneath the surface. Whatever they were about to find, it was a secret fiercely protected by the forest itself. Mark's mind raced with questions. What had Nathan confronted here? Was it a beast, a spirit, or something darker still? The carvings outside, the wolf's watchful eyes, the cave's chilling atmosphere, all pieces of a puzzle he was only beginning to understand. He tightened his grip on his flashlight, readying himself for whatever lay ahead. The air seemed to thicken, charged with anticipation, as they pressed forward into the unknown. The forest doesn't give up its secrets easily, Cyrus said grimly. Mark's breath caught in his throat as his flashlight beam landed on the makeshift camp nestled against the damp cave wall. The scattered scraps of cloth looked like remnants of a struggle, torn and stained, clinging to the jagged rocks as if trying to hold on. Nearby, a cracked compass lay half-buried under a pile of small stones, its needle frozen and useless. But it was the worn leather-bound journal resting beneath them that drew Mark's trembling hands. The edges of the cover were frayed, soaked with moisture and dirt, yet something about the way it lay there spoke volumes. It was a lifeline, a message left behind in desperation. He sat carefully on a cold stone, unfastening the clasp and peeled back the cover. The pages inside, though yellowed and delicate, were remarkably intact. Nathan's handwriting flowed steadily across the lines, the familiar loops and slants anchoring Mark's heart to a man still alive in some way, despite his physical absence. As Mark read the first lines, his mind painted vivid images of Nathan's ordeal. A man pushed to his limits, shadowed by unknown threats lurking beyond the forest's edge. The journal recounted late-night footsteps that never seemed to belong to any animal, whispers carried on cold winds that chilled more than just skin, and fleeting glimpses of a shadowy figure haunting the tree line. Something more than a man, something malevolent. Nathan wrote of fighting not merely for his own survival but for the safety of Ridgewood itself, confronting a darkness he described as the flame that never dies. The phrase lingered in the air, heavy with meaning and dread. Mark's fingers trembled as he turned to the final entry. The ink was smudged, perhaps blurred by tears or rain, yet the words burned bright. If I disappear, know that the fire inside me burns for more than just life. It is a warning. The weight of those words pressed on Mark's chest like a physical force. They weren't just a farewell, they were a call to action, a burden passed to those who might follow. Outside the cave, the faint rustle of leaves and distant calls of forest creatures had fallen silent, as if the woods themselves held their breath. Mark glanced up toward the entrance where Cyrus stood vigil, his jaw tight, eyes darting nervously between the shadows and the safety of the flickering daylight. The older man's unease was palpable, an unspoken warning that their time here was growing short. Closing the journal with a careful, reverent motion, Mark looked out into the deepening darkness beyond the cave. His mind raced with questions. What exactly had Nathan faced in these woods? What force had forced him into hiding? And most unsettling, what threat remained? Waiting still in the shadows? The realization settled over Mark like a cold fog. Nathan's disappearance was not a random misfortune, but part of a complex and dangerous puzzle he was only beginning to comprehend. He tucked the journal beneath his arm, the tangible weight grounding him. "We're stepping into something bigger than we thought," Mark said quietly, voice low but steady, determination flickering in his eyes as he stood. Mark's boots slipped on the slick moss-covered roots as the storm unleashed its fury around them. Rain hammered down like a relentless drumbeat, soaking through his jacket and chilling him to the bone. The wind howled through the silver pine trees, bending their ancient limbs in desperate bows, and the forest seemed to close in tighter with every step. Water pooled in the trail's ruts, turning their carefully plotted route into a treacherous path of mud and hidden pitfalls. Each breath Mark drew was sharp and cold, his lungs burning with effort as he strained to keep pace with Cyrus, whose wiry frame moved with uncanny sure-footedness despite the worsening conditions. The journal, soaked but still clutched in Mark's trembling hands, felt heavier with each mile. Photos of the carved stones peeked from inside his jacket pocket, smeared at the edges but intact. Their discovery had sparked a fragile hope, but now that hope battled with the growing dread that thickened the air like the storm clouds overhead. "Listen," Mark muttered, straining to hear over the roar of the wind. A chorus of distant cries rose and fell, a mix of wild animal howls, snapping branches, and something far stranger. Beneath the natural sounds, an eerie cadence hummed faintly, like chanting carried on the wind from a place just out of reach. Cyrus paused abruptly, his head tilting as if attuned to the forest's whispered secrets. His voice was low and tense when he spoke. "The spirits of Silverpine don't take kindly to intruders. They guard these woods fiercely, ancient guardians bound to protect what man shouldn't find." His eyes scanned the dark shapes beyond the trees, wary and unblinking. "This storm, it's no accident. The forest is angry." Mark swallowed hard, feeling the cold knot of fear tighten in his stomach. He tried to steady his shaking hands and forced a wry smile. "I'm not sure I believe in ghosts, but whatever's out there, it's watching us." The rain blurred the world into muted shades of gray and green. Thunder rumbled distantly, shaking the treetops, and a flash of lightning briefly illuminated the forest's tangled depths. Mark caught a glimpse of twisted branches resembling grasping hands, shadows that moved too deliberately, too silently for the wind alone to shape. Their steps slowed as they approached a clearing shrouded in mist. The sudden openness felt unnatural, an expanse of damp earth surrounded by towering firs. Near the center, half hidden beneath soggy leaves, lay the remains of a fire pit. The charred stones glistened wetly, and faint wisps of smoke curled upward, barely visible against the gray sky. Mark's heart pounded fiercely, each beat echoing in his ears. He knelt, brushing away the rain-dampened leaves and debris. The ground beneath was warm, not the gentle heat of a dying fire, but the unmistakable warmth of something freshly burned. His breath caught. "Someone's been here," Mark said, voice barely above a whisper, eyes scanning the tree line. Or maybe Nathan was close. Cyrus's gaze hardened, scanning every shadow. Or worse, someone else. The two men exchanged a glance heavy with unspoken fears. The forest that had swallowed Nathan seemed alive now, pulsing with an unseen menace. Mark reached for the radio clipped to his belt, fingers numb. Static crackled through the speaker, words fractured and lost in bursts of interference. The signal was weak, unreliable, a fragile thread to the outside world that threatened to snap at any moment. He pressed the button again. "Base, this is Mark and Cyrus. Do you copy? Over." Only static answered, a ghostly hiss that mocked their isolation. Frustration and helplessness washed over Mark. He clenched his jacket tighter around him, a futile barrier against the cold and the unknown pressing in. Memories flooded his mind. The carved stone message, Nathan's worn journal, the strange markings, the eerie encounters. Each piece painted a fragment of a puzzle darker and more complex than a simple lost hiker tale. What exactly are we facing? Mark asked himself, voice rough with exhaustion and fear. What or who is this hidden threat? The forest whispered around him, a living entity that breathed and waited. Shadows lengthened. The rain softened to a steady drizzle, but the feeling of being watched only grew stronger. Mark squared his shoulders, determination flickering to life beneath the weight of doubt. He met Cyrus's eyes. "We can't let this end with Nathan lost," Mark vowed, staring into the dark woods. Back in Ridgewood, the air hung heavy with a mix of anticipation and unease as Mark gathered his team inside the cramped briefing room at the ranger station. The faded maps of Silverpine Forest lay spread across the table, edges curling with age, while dim overhead lights cast long shadows on the faces of the men who had answered his call. Mark's voice was steady but carried the weight of urgency as he flipped through Nathan's worn journal and displayed photos of the carved stones, each image etched with strange symbols and cryptic lines. "These aren't just markings," Mark said, his dark eyes scanning the group. "They're warnings." Nathan believed they were tied to something dangerous, something alive in the forest. Owen Mercer, the geologist, adjusted his glasses and leaned forward, tracing his finger along one of the photographs. "The stones themselves are unique," Owen explained in a calm, measured tone. "They're part of a rare mineral formation, mica-rich quartz that can amplify sound in unusual ways. That's likely why you hear those eerie echoes in Silverpine, especially near these carvings. But places like this often attract attention, sometimes the kind that brings trouble." His gaze was sharp, hinting at both fascination and caution. Liam Scott, the youngest member of the team and a local ranger with keen eyes, listened silently, his hands clenched at his sides. He had seen too much already, too many unexplained shadows and too many moments when the forest seemed to watch him back. Mark noticed the tension in Liam's posture, the way his jaw tightened as he fought to keep his nerves in check. "We all feel it," Liam said quietly, voice barely above a whisper. "Like something's out there, waiting." Mark nodded solemnly. The team packed their gear with deliberate care, flashlights, rope, extra batteries, emergency rations, each man preparing for the unknown. The scent of pine and damp earth filled the ranger station as they stepped outside, where the sky was heavy with clouds threatening rain. The path into Silverpine felt like stepping into a different world. The thick canopy swallowed light, turning midday into twilight. Mark led the way, his boots crunching softly on the leaf-strewn trail Nathan had once walked. With every step deeper into the forest, the atmosphere grew heavier, as if the very air resisted their intrusion. Shadows stretched unnaturally, flickering at the edge of vision, and a cold breeze whispered through the branches, carrying with it faint sounds, snaps, rustles, maybe voices, too distant to be sure. The trees seemed to lean closer, their twisted limbs clawing at the sky, while strange symbols reappeared on bark, carved with deliberate precision and growing more frequent as they progressed. Some resembled ancient runes, others looked like crude warnings. Mark's fingers brushed a fresh carving, and a chill ran down his spine. At times, Liam would glance nervously upward, eyes darting between branches. "I swear I felt eyes on me more than once," he admitted, voice tight with unease. The others shared his discomfort but pressed forward. The forest was no longer just a place of nature. It was a living enigma, watching, waiting, maybe even hunting. As evening approached, the team found a clearing near the stone carvings, a spot marked by a circle of ancient boulders, moss-covered and silent witnesses to untold secrets. They set up camp quickly, the flickering firelight casting long, trembling shadows against the dark backdrop. The crackle of flames was a small comfort in the oppressive darkness, and the men huddled close, exchanging quiet words and cautious glances. Mark pulled out Nathan's journal once more, reading passages aloud with reverence. "He was fighting something here," Mark said, voice low but resolute. "Not just the cold or the forest. Something alive, something dangerous." Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the stillness, raw, desperate, echoing through the trees. Every man froze, hearts pounding, eyes wide with shock. The sound lingered, then faded, leaving a heavy silence that pressed in on them all. Mark's face tightened with grim determination. He stared into the darkness beyond the firelight and said, "We're not just searching anymore. We're running toward something." The morning air was thick with dampness, the sky still a bruised gray from overnight rain as the team stirred from their uneasy sleep. Mark was the first to rise, his boots crunching softly on the leaf-littered ground as he stepped away from the flickering remnants of their dying campfire. The forest around them was hushed, but something in the heavy silence prickled his senses like a warning. He scanned the muddy earth near their campsite and froze. Fresh footprints marred the soft soil, huge, uneven, and unlike any animal or human Mark had ever seen. Their shapes twisted and blurred at the edges, as if formed by something that defied the natural laws he trusted. He crouched, tracing a clawed imprint with his gloved finger, feeling the unsettling chill of uncertainty settle deep in his chest. Owen knelt beside him, squinting as his scientific mind parsed the tracks. "These aren't from any known creature," Owen murmured, voice low but steady. "They're too large and the pattern's inconsistent, like a beast that's part animal, part something else. Something unnatural." His gaze flicked upward to the dense canopy, where shadows seemed to gather like watching eyes. Mark's pulse quickened. He stood, eyes sweeping the trees. Liam was farther back, his steps faltering, gaze darting wildly as if chased by ghosts. Mark called out, "Liam, you okay?" But the younger ranger didn't respond. He hesitated near a fallen log, face pale, jaw tight. Mark stepped closer, placing a firm hand on Liam's shoulder. "Tell me what you saw," Mark urged, voice gentle but firm. Liam swallowed hard, voice barely a whisper. "Something watching me, in the dark. It wasn't right." His eyes glistened with a mixture of fear and shame. "I didn't want to say. Thought you'd think I was losing it." Mark's grip tightened reassuringly. "You're not alone. We've all felt it. But we keep going, for Nathan." The words hung heavy in the misty air. Cyrus, ever the skeptic yet wary of the forest stories, stepped forward, breaking the tension. His voice was calm but edged with caution. "There are old legends about this place. A creature born from fire itself, a guardian, some say. Protector, but also predator if disturbed. We'd be fools to dismiss them." No one answered. The weight of those ancient words settled uneasily on the group as they pressed onward, following the strange trail through twisted roots and tangled underbrush. Suddenly, a sharp cry of pain shattered the fragile quiet. Owen stumbled, crashing face first into a concealed pit trap cleverly hidden beneath brittle leaves and broken branches. "Got caught," Owen groaned, struggling to free his leg. His face was flushed with frustration and pain, but he smiled wryly. "Well, that's a sign someone wants us out of here." Mark helped him up, inspecting the trap, a crude but effective snare designed to incapacitate. "They're defending this territory," Mark said grimly. "And whoever they are, they don't want visitors." The urgency in Mark's voice quickened the team's pace, every snap of twig or rustle of leaves now setting their nerves ablaze. As they approached a steep ravine hidden behind thick brambles, they found evidence of recent habitation, an improvised shelter of woven branches and tattered fabric. Mark's eyes scanned the scattered belongings. A cracked thermos, a half-burned candle, a torn backpack strap, but no sign of Nathan. Instead, the area told a story of struggle, dropped items, broken twigs bent under pressure, faint traces of blood mingling with dirt. A cold knot of dread tightened in Mark's gut, but he forced himself to speak. He was here. He fought. Whatever took him, it wasn't peaceful. The men exchanged solemn glances. Cyrus clenched his jaw, scanning the surrounding trees as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. We're stepping deeper into a fight that's been brewing long before any of us arrived. Mark drew himself up, shoulders squared. His voice was steady, resolute. Nathan fought to protect us all. Now it's our turn to finish what he started. They descended slowly into the forest's core, where the trees grew so thick their branches wove a dark canopy overhead, blotting out even the faintest stars. The air was damp and heavy, filled with the scent of moss and decay. Mark's flashlight flickered intermittently, casting long, jittery shadows across the gnarled roots that tangled the path like ancient serpents. Around them, electronic devices began to fail. Radios crackled with static before falling silent. Compasses spun in maddening circles, and their phones showed only blank screens. An uneasy silence settled, broken only by the crunch of leaves beneath boots and the distant drip of water seeping through the earth. Mark's jaw tightened. Years of wilderness experience told him this was no ordinary interference. "Stay close," he commanded quietly, his voice steady but low, aware of how fragile their calm was. The others nodded, faces pale but resolute. Liam's eyes darted nervously between the dense thicket and the cracked compass swinging uselessly in his hand. Cyrus, ever the skeptic, muttered under his breath. "The forest's grip is tightening. It doesn't want us here." As they reached a clearing, Mark's beam fell upon a circle of ancient stones standing tall like silent sentinels. Their rough surfaces were carved with deep grooves and symbols that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. Mark stepped closer, heart pounding. The carvings depicted a figure standing firm amid roaring flames, untouched and defiant, while everything else around was consumed. The scene sent a shiver crawling down his spine. "Warnings," he breathed, tracing the grooves with his fingers. These weren't made for decoration. Suddenly, a low, guttural growl ripped through the stillness. Every man froze, hands instinctively moving toward weapons. From the shadows emerged a pack of wolves, their eyes burning bright with unnatural fire that glowed like embers in the dark. Their coats shimmered with a strange sheen, and their movements were deliberate, almost intelligent. The beasts circled the group slowly, teeth bared but no immediate attack. Mark's voice tightened with authority. "Form a line. Hold your ground." The men arranged themselves quickly, backs to one another, weapons drawn but hands trembling slightly with tension. Liam swallowed hard, gripping his rifle tighter, the cold metal a small comfort. Cyrus stepped forward, raising his hands in a calming gesture. His tone was low and rhythmic as he chanted words long forgotten by most. The wolves' growls softened, ears twitching as if recognizing the ancient sounds. Slowly, they began to back away, eyes never leaving the group, retreating silently into the shadows from whence they came. A cold silence followed, heavy and suffocating. Mark exhaled sharply. "These aren't ordinary animals," he said, eyes scanning the dark forest edges. "They're guardians." The thought was both reassuring and terrifying. Guardians meant there was something precious, something dangerous nearby. They pressed onward with cautious steps, the forest closing in tighter around them. Mark's hand brushed against a thick carpet of moss covering a mound near the base of a twisted oak. Something beneath the moss felt unnatural, a hollow, a cavity. Kneeling, he peeled back the green veil, revealing a rough stone door embedded in the earth, its edges worn but intact. A carved symbol from Nathan's journal marked its center, an intricate flame encircled by roots. "This must be it," Mark whispered, signaling the others. Cyrus knelt beside him, eyes narrowing. The entrance Nathan wrote about, hidden and protected. The men prepared themselves. Flashlights flicked on, knives drawn, rifles at the ready, every muscle coiled with tension. Mark's mind raced, recalling the journal's warning of a battle not just for survival but for the balance itself. He took a deep breath, the cold air filling his lungs, and looked at the men. "We walk into the dark for those who couldn't make it out," he said quietly. The tunnel's cold breath wrapped around them, the damp walls slick with moisture that caught the flickering light from their flashlights. Mark's boots echoed softly against the rough stone floor, each step stirring a faint mist that clung to the air like a ghost. Ahead, a faint orange glow pulsed steadily, casting shifting shadows that danced on the jagged surfaces. The smell was sharp, acrid and thick, like smoke mixed with something ancient and untouched. Mark's throat tightened as he pressed forward, the weight of the moment settling heavily on his shoulders. Every sense screamed caution, but the pull to find Nathan and uncover the truth was stronger. Their lights swept over the cavern's entrance, revealing a surreal scene. Tiny embers floated midair, glowing softly as if alive, ghostly sparks that hovered without source or sound. The campfire remnants at the center were still warm, a faint haze of heat radiating from charred logs arranged with care. Nearby, personal items lay scattered. Nathan's worn hat, its brim frayed and dusty. A photo half-burned, the edges curling black, showing a younger Nathan with a faint smile. And his knife, blade chipped but still sharp, the handle scratched from long use. Mark's hands trembled as he knelt to pick up the knife, his voice barely a whisper. He was here, fighting until the end. The air felt charged, thick with an energy Mark couldn't explain. Around the cavern walls, ancient symbols were etched deep into stone, some jagged, others flowing like flames caught in rock. Cyrus moved slowly, tracing his fingers along the carvings, his face tight with unease. These markings, they speak of balance, fire and life intertwined. He murmured, voice low as if fearing to disturb the cavern's stillness. Before Mark could respond, a deep rumble rolled through the earth beneath their feet, shaking loose dust from the ceiling. The men instinctively stepped back, hearts pounding as a section of the cavern wall shuddered and slid open, revealing a hidden passage swallowed in shadow. From the darkness emerged a figure unlike anything Mark had ever seen, cloaked in swirling smoke and flickering flames, its form shifting like a living flame itself. Its eyes, glowing embers, held a fierce intelligence that burned through the dim light. The men froze, the air thick with tension as the figure's voice broke the silence. It was deep and resonant, carrying the weight of ages and a sorrow that pressed on their chests like a physical force. "I am the guardian spirit of this forest," it intoned, the flames around it pulsing with each word, bound to protect the delicate balance between fire's destruction and life's renewal. Its gaze shifted slowly to Mark and Cyrus, piercing yet calm, as if weighing their very souls. Mark swallowed hard, stepping forward with a steady voice despite the rising fear within him. "We've come searching for Nathan Cole. We found his trail here. He fought something beyond us." The Guardian's flames flickered with a flicker of recognition. Nathan's fight was mine as well. He sought to stop the corruption that threatened to consume not only Silverpine but the lands beyond. A dark force seeks to twist fire's power into an eternal blaze that devours all. The cavern seemed to grow hotter, the acrid scent intensifying, burning at the back of Mark's throat. He clenched his fists, the weight of responsibility settling on him like a heavy cloak. "What must we do? How can we stop it?" he asked, voice firm despite the quiver in his chest. The Guardian's flames danced wildly, casting monstrous shadows on the cavern walls. "You stand at the edge of a flame that could burn everything," it said solemnly. Mark stood at the edge of the clearing, the last tendrils of mist swirling around his boots as the first rays of dawn pierced through the towering pines. His chest tightened, not from the cold, but from the weight of the Guardian's warning that still echoed in his mind. The cavern's glow, the voice of the ancient spirit, the realization that Nathan's fight was far from over, they all pressed on him like a heavy cloak. His eyes scanned the horizon where Silverpine's dark silhouette met the pale sky, knowing that beneath its serene surface, something restless stirred. The group moved silently back toward Ridgewood, each man lost in his own thoughts. Liam's jaw was set tight, brows furrowed, as he clutched his notebook filled with recent observations. Cyrus walked with a steady gait, his weathered face shadowed but resolute. Even Owen, typically pragmatic and composed, seemed subdued, staring ahead as if grappling with the forest's unseen forces. As the familiar outlines of Ridgewood appeared through the thinning trees, Mark felt a flicker of relief, quickly snuffed out by a rising determination. The protective barrier of civilization felt fragile against what lay beyond. He broke the silence, voice low but firm. "We have to tell them. The town needs to understand what's at stake. Nathan's disappearance isn't just a loss. It's a warning." Back in the modest town hall, Mark gathered a crowd of familiar faces, former firefighters, rangers, and local leaders, each bearing the marks of worry and disbelief. He spread out Nathan's weather journal and the photographs of the carved stones on the long oak table. "These aren't just relics," Mark said, his hands steady despite the tremor in his voice. "They're messages. Nathan fought to protect us all from something dark, something alive in Silverpine." Liam stepped forward, voice steady but urgent. "There have been reports, strange lights deep in the woods, fires that flare without cause, and shadows moving just beyond sight. It's like the forest itself is restless." Murmurs rippled through the room. Some exchanged skeptical glances, others nodded grimly. Cyrus added quietly, "The stories I grew up with weren't just old wives' tales. The forest has its guardians, beings tied to the land and fire. But when those forces are disturbed, they can become dangerous, even deadly." Mark's gaze swept across the room, meeting eyes that mirrored his own mix of fear and resolve. "Our victory, if we can call it that, is temporary. The balance is fragile, and it's up to us to hold it. We owe Nathan that much." Outside, the wind stirred the bare branches, rattling the windows like whispered warnings. Mark couldn't shake the feeling that Silverpine was watching, waiting for the next move. That night, as he lay awake in his modest home, shadows played across the ceiling, twisting like silent flames. Memories of Nathan's laughter, his quiet strength, and the journal's haunting final words mingled with a cold certainty. The battle ahead was not just with the forest's mysteries, but with a darkness that sought to consume everything. Mark's fingers curled around the old compass Nathan had carried, the weight of it grounding him. He thought of his friend's unwavering courage, the man who had faced every fire with steady hands and a calm heart. Now, Mark realized he was the one who had to stand firm, not just as a protector of the forest, but as a guardian of hope. The flickering candle on his bedside table cast long shadows as Mark whispered into the quiet room. Sometimes, the fiercest flames burn beneath the quietest surfaces. The air was crisp and still beneath the towering pines of Silverpine Forest, a hush settling over the dense underbrush as the morning sun filtered through leaves in scattered beams. Mark Jensen moved slowly, boots crunching softly on the bed of fallen needles and twigs, eyes fixed on the jagged stone ahead. The group of rangers had stumbled upon it just hours before, an unmistakable carving, fresh against the weathered granite, its message sharp and clear: "Protect the fire, protect the life." Mark's breath hitched in his chest. The words, simple yet weighty, felt like a beacon cutting through the fog of uncertainty that had haunted Ridgewood since Nathan disappeared. He stepped closer, running his fingers gently over the cool stone surface, the carvings still rough from recent chiseling. His fingers trembled with a mixture of reverence and sorrow. This was Nathan's handprint, his voice, etched into the forest itself, a testament to a battle fought far beyond the eyes of the town. A sudden breeze stirred the branches, carrying with it the faint scent of smoke and pine resin. Mark closed his eyes, letting the moment wash over him. "Nathan," he whispered, voice low and cracked. "You're still here. I know it." His heart ached with loss but swelled with pride. Pride for a friend who had stood firm against shadows darker than any wildfire he had ever faced. Behind him, the forest was alive with quiet movement. The other rangers maintained a respectful distance, their faces etched with a mix of awe and unease. Liam Scott, the youngest among them, shifted nervously, breaking the silence. "Do you think he meant this as a warning or a promise?" His voice was hesitant but filled with earnest curiosity. Mark looked up, meeting Liam's wide eyes. Both, I think. Nathan fought to protect the balance here. The fire is more than just a flame. It's life, destruction, and renewal all at once. He wanted us to remember that, to keep fighting. His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the clearing as Mark paced slowly, eyes scanning the surrounding woods. The forest that had once felt like a sanctuary now carried a weight of mystery and threat. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bird call seemed charged with meaning. He knew the danger had not vanished. It had only shifted, retreating into the shadows to watch and wait. Mark's thoughts drifted to the countless nights spent searching, the whispered fears shared around cold campfires, the journal pages soaked in determination and despair. His fingers tightened into a fist. "We can't let Nathan's sacrifice be in vain," he vowed silently. "The town, the forest, we owe him that much." With deliberate steps, Mark circled the stone, taking in every detail, the faint traces of moss at its base, the chipped edges where time had gnawed away, and the fresh cuts where Nathan's final message stood defiantly against nature's wear. The forest seemed to breathe with him, alive and watchful. "Do you feel it too?" Liam asked, voice barely above a whisper. Mark nodded, eyes scanning the horizon. "Ido." The forest is waiting for what comes next. The rangers gathered closer, sharing looks of determination mingled with uncertainty. They were no longer just men of Ridgewood. They were guardians of a fragile truth, caught between the natural and the unseen. Mark's mind flashed with memories of Nathan's strength, his unyielding spirit in the face of encroaching darkness. As the light shifted, dappling the ground with gold and shadow, Mark knelt and placed a hand on the stone. "Your fight lives on, brother. We will never let the flame die." Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional, highlighting themes of mystery, survival, and the human spirit's resilience. It aims to raise awareness about the importance of preparedness and the power of hope in dire situations.